Today, we're diving into one of the world's greatest epics, the Mahabharata. But we're not just going to talk about the big battles and the royal drama. No, we're going to zoom in on a single, incredibly powerful metaphor that sits right at its heart. A fundamental choice that frames not just the story, but our own lives too.
So let's start with a really simple question. Imagine you're caught in a massive storm. What's the first thing you do? You look for shelter, right? Well, the ancient sage Vyasa, who composed this epic, uses that exact idea to set up the entire thing.
He presents us with two trees and a choice. Which one offers real protection? Now, each of these trees represents a totally different path through life, a different way of being. And this isn't just some clever story detail, it's literally the key to understanding what the Mahabharata is all about.
This metaphor, this tale of two trees, is our way in. It's the framework for unlocking all the wisdom that's packed into this epic story.
But before we break down these trees, you kind of have to get why this text is considered so foundational. See, it wasn't designed to just be an entertaining story. It was meant to be a practical guide for living, something that could help anyone, from a young kid to an old man, figure out how to live a better life.
Now, the Mahabharata makes a very, very bold claim. It doesn't say, hey, I'm a myth or a fairy tale. It presents itself as a record of things that actually happened.
In Sanskrit, its genre is called itihasa, which literally translates to, thus it happened. Think about that for a second. It's not saying once upon a time. It's saying this is history, written by an eyewitness to make really deep wisdom accessible to everybody through the stories of real people.
And there's this famous old proverb that just nails its incredible scope. It says, what is not in the Mahabharata is nowhere in the world. I mean, the idea is that every human story, every possible dilemma, every single emotion you could ever feel, it's all in there somewhere. If it's happening in our world today, you can bet there's a parallel in the Mahabharata.
Okay, let's dive into this first tree. This is the one rooted in what the text calls a dharma, which you can think of as injustice, envy, and just blind ambition.
Now, Vyasa does something truly brilliant here. He maps the key characters right onto the tree. The root? That's the blind king, Dhritarashtra, whose obsessive attachment to his son is what fuels the whole conflict. His arrogant son, Duryodhana, he's the trunk. The powerful warrior Karna forms the branches, the scheming Shakuni is the leaves, and the cruel Dushasana, he is the fruit.
You know that old saying, you judge a tree by its fruit, right? Well, that's exactly the point. The fruit here represents the final action, the thing that happens that reveals the tree's true rotten nature. And in this case, that fruit is one single catastrophic event that basically guarantees a war.
And that event is the infamous dice game. After being cheated out of their kingdom, the Pandava brothers end up losing their shared wife, Queen Draupadi. She's then literally dragged into the royal court by her hair. It's an absolutely shocking moment. So there, in the middle of this court, surrounded by all the greatest elders and warriors of the age, Draupadi asks this devastatingly sharp question. She says, "Was my husband already a slave when he gambled me away? Because if he was, a slave owns nothing, so he couldn't have staked me." And the entire assembly, just silence. They're totally stumped.
But then Karna, remember, he's the main branch of this tree, he breaks the silence. And he doesn't even try to answer her legal point. Instead, he just offers this cruel, twisted justification. He says a woman with 5 husbands is basically a slave anyway, that she has no honor worth protecting. And then he tells Dushasana to publicly disrobe her.
And that horrific action, that's the fruit of the tree. It lights a fire that can never be put out. In that moment, the Pandava brother, Bhima, makes this terrible, blood-curdling vow to one day tear open Dushasana's chest and drink his blood. Right there, the seeds of the great Kurukshetra war were planted.
Okay, so that was the dark path. Now, let's turn to the other tree Vyasa shows us. This is the alternative, the tree of Dharma, the tree that stands for righteousness, for justice, and for cosmic order.
Now, this tree has a similar structure, but it's guided by a completely different principle. At its root, you have Sri Krishna, the embodiment of divine justice itself. The trunk is King Yudhishthira, whose whole life is about doing the right thing. The mighty Bhima and the archer Arjuna are its branches. But the fruit of this tree, well, it's not a single act of aggression. It's their steadfast endurance, their commitment to keeping their word, even through 13 long years of exile. The virtuous twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, they represent this fruit. The idea that upholding what's right, no matter how hard it is, eventually restores balance. So you see where the real difference is, right? It all starts at the root. The tree of Adharma is rooted in Dhritarashtra's personal, blind attachment to his son and his own power. But the tree of Dharma? That one is rooted in Sri Krishna, a figure who represents divine wisdom and an impartial commitment to justice for everyone.
And this is where it all comes together. This brilliant analogy isn't just about some ancient kings and queens. It's a timeless framework for the choices that all of us face in our own lives, every single day.
You know, one of the most amazing things about the Mahabharata is how much it respects your free will. Vyasa never commands you. He doesn't wag his finger and say, you must choose this tree. Nope. Instead, he just lays out the story, he shows you exactly where each path leads, and then he lets you decide for yourself.
And that brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? Now when we look at these two trees, they're not just abstract ideas anymore. We can see them for what they really are. Living systems of character, of action, and of absolutely inevitable consequences, all embodied by these iconic people.
So, when you boil it all down, what's the choice? Well, it's pretty stark. It's a life built on envy, one that's constantly trying to tear other people down just to get ahead. Or it's a life built on doing what's right, on protecting order and justice. One path might look like it's winning at first, but it always leads to self-destruction. The other path, well, it's full of struggle, but it leads to a real, enduring victory.
The war itself might have ended thousands of years ago, but that central question, it's still alive. It's there for every single one of us, every single day. The choice is always present. So the real question Vyasa leaves us with is this: which tree are you building with your life?